hello everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss the movements and debuts of the Billboard Hot Dance Charts in immaculate detail with in-depth reviews of each debut each week. This year is looking really rough, man, my god. I mean, I could point out how generally boring the charts have been since Charli XCX's impact has really come through and absolutely decimated this chart in the past few weeks, but even with that, this week felt really underwhelming, as even with a minor Childish Gambino album bomb, the debuts were not particularly good across the board. And also, given some of the stuff that's charting right now and actually sticking around, yeah, 2024 has not been a good year for the dance charts at all, and really I'm disappointed by that. And nowhere is that more apparent than at the top, where Miles on It by Marshmello and Kane Brown is still at #1. Now, in a few weeks I can see this actually being dethroned, considering a certain song is making a real push to get some absolutely huge momentum on the Hot 100, but for now this has big radio, big streaming, and it's going to stick around for a while. So even if it does fall back from the big single that's coming, it's probably going to retake #1. God help us all. And on the topic of garbage, 360 by Charli XCX is actually up to #2, where the streaming looks like it's big on this one, and given that radio is slowly getting on board, this is probably going to end up sticking around too. And if it manages to overtake Miles on It, I mean, it is a better song, but still it's not good at all. But before that, Illusion by Dua Lipa is at #3, and really this doesn't surprise me considering radio is starting to stall out pretty considerably, and given that streaming has never really been on board with this, I don't expect this to stick around much longer at this spot. Especially when right beneath it you have Apple by Charli XCX at #4, where TikTok is really on board with this and the streaming is absolutely huge, and it's also boosted by Kamala Harris's endorsement of Brat, where this particular song got a lot of attention, and given its huge streaming to begin with, this was going to hit the Hot 100, I'm not exactly surprised there. And I mean, obviously it was going to take over Houdini by Dua Lipa at #5, where the streaming is really starting to fall back with this one, and given that radio has not really been keeping this around much longer, I'm not expecting this to stick much higher at this spot. Granted, it's up against I Don't Wanna Wait by David Guetta and One Republic at #6, where the radio is throwing this out in record time, and given that streaming is starting to stall out, I don't expect this to last much longer either, and honestly I'm okay with that. Same deal with Joyride by Kesha falling down to #7, where the streaming is starting to stall out with this one already, and given that radio is not touching it, I don't see this lasting that much higher, but it is still sticking around a lot better than I expected. And finally, we have 3 more Charli XCX songs in the top 10, all of which have very different reasons for being here. I mean, you've got Von Dutch at #8, where the streaming is still really damn good on this one, and given that it has got some good sales behind it, I'm not exactly surprised this is doing quite well. I'm not complaining about it either. Followed by Girl So Confusing with Lorde at #9. This one's starting to fall back considerably on streaming. It's kind of being overshadowed by a lot of other songs on the album, and also I get why it's here to begin with because the Lorde remix was going to get attention, but besides that, there wasn't a whole lot left to it to really get any higher. I'm not exactly surprised it's falling. And finally, 365 is back in the top 10 at #10, and I expect this to get much higher considering the really big momentum this has got going for it on streaming, and given that it's basically a companion track to 360, which is already blowing up as is, I'm not exactly surprised this is sticking around too. I can't complain there. But the weird thing with this chart right now is that a lot of our fall-offs recently have been either massive Titan songs that are already going to absolutely make the year-end list, or songs that underperformed. For this week, it was Whatever by Kygo and Ava Max falling off considerably. It's probably going to end up making a pretty damn high spot on the year-end list, even if it did fall victim to the 26-week rule. And alongside that, we also had My Oh My by Ava Max falling off too. This one's probably going to make the year-end list as well, even if it's not good at all. But it's also kind of indicative of a lead single for an Ava Max album that's kind of underperformed. This isn't doing nearly as well as I expected. But our falls are where things get a lot more interesting, as a lot of them were mainly thanks to Charli XCX's album being consistently stable across the board and pushing down a fair few tracks. I mean, you had your expected ones with John Summit, with Tears with Paige Cavell collapsing to 44, and Go Back with Some Focus and Julia Church only falling to 25. That's promising. But every other fall really did surprise me here, and a lot of them are in serious danger next week. I mean, you had For Life by Kygo, Zach Abel and Nile Rodgers collapsing to 47. Man, it's not been a good week for Kygo here. I expect this to be gone next week. And alongside that, we had It Boy by Bibi No Money, unfortunately stalling out on streaming at 35. Although it is taking down These Words by Badger and Natasha Bedingfield down to 33 with it, so I can't exactly complain there. Finally, that leaves I Like It by Alesso and Nate Smith down to 22, and honestly, this kind of surprised me that this fell as hard as it did. I guess the formula just straight up isn't working with this one a second time, and given that Alesso is a much smaller name than Marshmello nowadays, I'm not exactly surprised this isn't performing as well as people expected. But what was more important came in our jumps and comebacks, where man man, we had a crap ton of them here. I mean, our 2 returns are at least reasonable, with the You and Me Revo remix by Disclosure and Elisa Doolittle returning to 41, where this actually might have a chance at the year-end list. I mean, it's blowing up in the UK right now, so I'm not exactly surprised. And for some fucking reason, we also had Somebody 2024 by Goche, Kimber, Fisher, Chris Lake, and Sam Sanson at 46. Seriously, who the fuck is listening to this still? It should have been gone ages ago. Why the fuck is it coming back? But what matters most came in our jumps, where that Kamala Harris endorsement really helped Charlie XCX get a lot of songs to rebound up higher. I think about it all the times at 43, So I's at 36, and I might say something stupid's up to 32. It's a shame that 2 of these are absolute crap, but hey, I can't complain about So I rebounding, that's a good song. And on the topic of mediocrity, X Slide by 2KE and AAoD Yuli somehow continued up to 24, where TikTok is on board with this in a big way, meaning this will probably end up being a fucking hit. Just absolutely wonderful, as if we need more Brazilian funk on this chart. Thankfully though, our last 2 jumps were genuinely promising, where both of these rebounded thanks to remixes, with Girls by Dom Dollar up to 34. Man, that's really nice to see rebound. It might actually have a chance at the year-end list now. And most pleasingly, Places to Be by Fred Again, Anderson Park, and Chica up to 27, where this is already locked into year-end list spots, and with announcement of his new album coming out soon that features this song and the other Blue Sky singles on it, I'm genuinely excited to see how this goes. This might rebound considerably in the next couple of weeks. But what aren't really great songs came in our new debuts this week, where things start off particularly rough with number 50, To the Moon by Pitbull, Neo, and Afrojack featuring DJ Buddha.
Son, take my hand, and where we'll run until the moon turns into the sun.
Okay, seriously, what do you want me to really say about this? The goddamn music video for this song literally references Give Me Everything, and given that 3 of the names on this song were on that track, this just feels like it's baiting off nostalgia and people recognizing the names from that particular track. And given that this has been on pop airplay for a month now, I'm honestly surprised it's taken this long for this to chart. But then when you get to the song itself, yeah, I get why people are not really on board with this. It's not particularly good. More than anything, this chart run just reminds me a lot of Tonight by the Black Eyed Peas, and this just feels as equally as lazy, even if it isn't as bad as that particular track. I mean, at least Neo sounds like he cares. There's a modestly okay hook here, if nothing else, and the production at least has some breezy atmosphere, but it is also a blatant ripoff of Jonas Blue's sound from 2016. I mean, seriously, a lot of people make comparisons to Perfect Strangers in the production with those horns on the drop, and really, I'm starting to hear it a lot more, and it's way worse than that song. But the problem is exactly that. This sounds really dated and phoned in, and Pitbull sounds like he could not give less of a shit as he sings the most generic party lyrics, when this party gets so elevated that it ends up reaching the moon, and that's really it. There's nothing else of interest here. It's forgettable and utterly bland radio filler that just won't stick around, and given the sound of this isn't remotely fresh or modern or interesting, it just feels like clickbait for an older song that's a lot better than this. And I'm not even a big fan of Give Me Everything, but compared to this, it's way better. This isn't remotely good, skip it. Number 49, Fall at Your Feet by CYRIL and Dean Lewis.
Your feet, you let your tears rain down on me.
Okay, wow, I'm so conflicted on the existence of this remix at all. I mean, on one hand, while I still think CYRIL has potential, both Stumbling and especially the remix of Sound of Silence were not good at all and really didn't deserve to be as big as they are. So seeing him go for that same formula again just gave me a lot to worry about. But on the other hand, the original Fall at Your Feet by Crowded House is a goddamn classic, and if there was any singer to get on board to actually cover this, I wouldn't have minded Dean Lewis covering it. His voice actually fits well for this particular song. I mean, if Boy and Bear could make a great cover of it back in 2010, I honestly was expecting this would be pretty damn solid, and after hearing it, okay, this might actually be my favourite CYRIL song to date. I mean, Dean Lewis definitely helps. I've always liked this guy's more soulful, acoustic-driven voice, and given that he's got a lot of personality and room to breathe in this mix, he honestly makes the original song sound goddamn great in the modern age, especially when you match him with this really spacious production that was surprisingly a lot better than I expected. I mean, you've got those piano-driven verses that are absolutely gorgeous, where there's a lot of room for Dean Lewis to actually sing and belt his lungs out, and honestly, there was a lot of really nice atmosphere across the board with this particular particular track, even on the parts of it that did throw me off, which in this case, I'm sorry, the percussion once again feels very dry and flat, not really matching the atmosphere or any sort of energy of the track whatsoever, and feeling a bit bland as a result. It's a shame too, because everything else here is genuinely really damn good, but that percussion really holds this back from being something that I really love. But still, really damn good cover. Honestly gave me a lot of hope that CYRIL was going to actually improve his production style in the future, but still, this should have been way better than it is. This was close to being great. That's really unfortunate. Number 31, Black Friday, Pretty Like the Sun by Lost Frequencies and Tom Odell.
Show me how it's done. You look so pretty like the sun.
Is this just going to be the week of songs referencing older tracks? Because we have yet another remix here, this time of a recent Tom Odell song called Black Friday that wasn't particularly good and really didn't have the sort of chart run that made for his best song in Another Love, so I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of this. So of course, the best way to fix this song that wasn't particularly interesting to begin with is to make the vocals somehow faster and more time stretched, combine that with a really bland tropical house beat, and result in one of the most bland remixes I've heard in recent memory, which even for Lost Frequencies standards, that's really disappointing. Look, I know Lost Frequencies has been overusing hooks as far back as Are You With Me, but that song at least had atmosphere. The vocals were actually really good, really well integrated. The hook was really damn good as well, whereas this is a complete mess where the time stretching really annoys the crap out of me, making Tom Odell's really pretty vocals sound really flat in this mix and not sound remotely good at all. And when your mixing sounds really lazy with no sort of credible atmosphere to begin with, yeah, this is not a particularly good remix at all, and really frustrated me too. I expect a lot better from Lost Frequencies nowadays. I mean, between this and In My Bones, he's really burning any goodwill with me. This is not a good song at all. I'd pass on it. Number 17, Got To Be by Childish Gambino. Honestly, it's really surprising that it's taken this long for Childish Gambino to get any sort of album impact here. I mean, I know he's not an outwardly electronic artist, but there's several songs on Because the Internet that could have easily fit here. I mean, seriously, No Exit's a goddamn great song. It deserved to be here, at least in some form. But now we have two songs from his new album charting here, both deep cuts that I really don't expect to last, with this one using a really obvious sample of The Prodigy's Breathe. Again, we're using more samples this week, but in this case, this might be the best of the sample-driven songs that I've covered this week, and really, this goddamn slaps. I was a huge fan of it. I mean, it starts off with a really gorgeous synth-driven intro that really does sound pretty as all hell, especially against the Travis Scott X vocal inflections that really do sound great here. Honestly, Childish Gambino could sell that sound really damn well, but then the song explodes into this harder-hitting trap knock with some really great bass production, as the guitars from Breathe are given a lot more space in the mix and sound genuinely awesome, especially when Childish Gambino goes for a much lower vocal range that really sounds menacing as all hell and really delivers a lot to like in this track. I'm just glad that Childish Gambino has gone down this route. It's been something that I hope he's done more of in recent years, and with songs like this, he proves he can absolutely nail that dark, menacing aesthetic really damn well. I mean, I don't expect us to have any sort of staying power next week. I might actually see this falling off the charts entirely, but for now, I'm really glad it's here. This is a great song. Finally, number 11, Hearts Were Meant to Fly by Childish Gambino.
Boy, tell me how it feel. Tell me how it feel. This is real.
This one, however, okay, I get why this charted. It's the intro to the album, but man, it's absolutely not one of my favorites here. I mean, the wubs sound quite cool at first, but honestly, after a while, they get really damn obnoxious, especially when you put them next to a beat that teases an explosion or a proper drop, which we never get across the entire track. I mean, it genuinely feels unfinished as all hell, which for an intro, at least it makes sense, but it does not result in something that I ever want to come back to. Combine that with the obnoxious chipmunk vocals, the flexing that gets really damn generic, especially from Childish Gambino. He can do a lot better than this, and the drum and bass integrations that honestly should have hit a lot harder than they did. Honestly, this is not a particularly great track. It might actually be one of my least favorites from the album here. I mean, it's not terrible, but again, I have no reason to ever come back to this again. But it's not the worst here. That's going to Black Friday, Pretty Like the Sun by Lost Frequencies and Tom Odell. Man, the sound of that track did not not work for me at all. What a disappointment from Lost Frequencies. I expect a lot better there. Now, best of the week, honestly, I was really tempted to give it to CYRIL and Dean Lewis, but really it's going to Got to Be by Childish Gambino. That song absolutely slaps, and it's really nice to see here. Genuinely a nice change of pace on this chart. I wouldn't mind actually having a run, even if I don't expect it will. Next week, I can see a certain Charlie XCX song getting a bit boost, but otherwise I don't really expect a whole lot to come out of Porter Robinson or even Empire of the Sun. Instead, we might get debuts from Drake and Fuerza Regida. So I'm expecting another bad week. Just lovely. But yeah, that's all for this episode of an analysis of dance. See you next time.